number 2. And as we said, today we are going to be talking about uh, credit card fraud detection methods and what are the strategies that organizations, particularly banks, need to adopt to be able to detect and prevent this fraud. So, guys, very, very important for you to know that, gone are the days where you just need plain basic analytical skills to be able to look at or detect analysis, including fraud-related data for fraud-related analytics. What is important here for you to know is that what is important for you to know is that this part of the story, which is critical thinking, is extremely important when you are building your fraud and risk model. And when you're building your fraud and risk model, critical thinking skills become important. What do we understand by critical thinking? Anyone? What do we understand by critical thinking? And why do you think critical thinking is so essential when you got to evaluate fraud? Any idea? Wild guesses? Anyone, guys? Multiple scenarios, absolutely correct, need to be, so therefore not just multiple scenarios, but complex sets of reasoning or data need to be analyzed, and therefore that requires not just rational or logical thinking, but requires out of the box thinking as well, and hence critical thinking. You need to understand the core problem better. Agree, Agya, in terms of not just understanding, because many a times what we do is we're only looking at the tip of the iceberg. The actual problem may lie beneath, and that's what becomes important when we're looking at fraud and risk analytics and the data related to this kind of analytics. We not just want to understand, but we want to understand how and what becomes important when we want to look at critical thinking and how it's going to help us detect and prevent frauds. So I'm going to play a nice video that I normally do with regards to critical thinking with companies. Watch it. We're not going to solve the puzzle, but just think of, if given the time, would you be able to solve it or not? One or two parts, yes or no. Yes, you would be able to solve it or not. So just pay attention for the first couple of minutes more than otherwise to see whether you can solve this problem or not. And then when we come back, I want you to tell me from the critical thinking perspective, what elements are expected from the video that are going to be useful for fraud and risk analytics. Yeah.
You and 9 other individuals have been captured by super intelligent alien overlords. The aliens think humans look quite tasty, but their civilization forbids eating highly logical and cooperative beings. Unfortunately, they're not sure whether you qualify, so they decide to give you all a test. Through its universal translator, the alien guarding you tells you the following. You will be placed in a single file line facing forward in size order, so that each of you can see everyone lined up ahead of you. You will not be able to look behind you or step out of line. Each of you will have either a black or a white hat on your head, assigned randomly, and I won't tell you how many of each color there are. When I say to begin, each of you must guess the color of your hat, starting with the person in the back and moving up the line. And don't even try saying words other than black or white, or signaling some other way, like intonation or volume. You'll all be eaten immediately. If at least 9 of you guess correctly, You'll all be spared.
You have 5 minutes to discuss and come up with a plan, and then I'll line you up, assign your hats, and we'll begin.
Can you think of a strategy guaranteed to save everyone?
Anyone, guys? You can answer it. You cannot answer it. Yeah. Any thoughts there? I'm not asking you to answer it, but just given some time, would you be able to give it a shot or not? Anyone, guys? Are you just logged in and at the beach, or are you in class, people? Because you seem to be a little slow in response. Good. As a team discussion, you can try, of course. So therefore, the attitude is positive. Good. Anybody says, I don't think I can, or I, or as a my team can answer it in such a short notice. Anybody having those kinds of thoughts? Okay, if those are not the kind of thoughts, then that's good. That's the first yardstick that you will want to, get rid of if you want to work with people in the fraud analytics zone when you're looking at skills such as critical thinking from them.
The key is
Let's
that the
watch
person
the
at the
answer
back of
now.
the line who can see everyone else's hats
Right.
can use the words black or white to communicate some coded information. So what meaning can be assigned to those words that will allow everyone else to deduce their hat colors? It can't be the total number of black or white hats. There are more than 2 possible values. But what does have 2 possible values is that number's parity. That is, whether it's odd or even. So the solution is to agree that whoever goes first will, for example, say black if he sees an odd number of black hats, and white if he sees an even number of black hats. Let's see how it would play out if the hats were distributed like this. The tallest captive sees 3 black hats in front of him, so he says black, telling everyone else he sees an odd number of black hats. He gets his own hat color wrong, but that's okay, since you're collectively allowed to have one wrong answer. Prisoner 2 also sees an odd number of black hats, so she knows hers is white and answers correctly. Prisoner 3 sees an even number of black hats, so he knows that his must be one of the black hats the first 2 prisoners saw. Prisoner 4 hears that and knows that she should be looking for an even number of black hats since one was behind her. But she only sees one, so she deduces that her hat is also black. Prisoners 5 through 9 are each looking for an odd number of black hats, which they see, so they figure out that their hats are white. Now it all comes down to you at the front of the line. If the 9th prisoner saw an odd number of black hats, that can only mean one thing. You'll find that this strategy works for any possible arrangement of the hats. The first prisoner has a 50% chance of giving a wrong answer about his own hat, but the parity information he conveys allows everyone else to guess theirs with absolute certainty. Each begins by expecting to see an odd or even number of hats of the specified color. If what they count doesn't match, that means their own hat is that color. And every time this happens, the next person in line will switch the parity they expect to see. So that's it. You're free to go.
So people, having seen this part of the video and having been talking about the fact that in critical thinking is important for fraud and risk analytics, what aspects of this video would you relate to a topic like fraud and risk analytics? Yeah, what would, and obviously in and around critical thinking, what would you focus on, or what would you highlight here? Any skills, any thoughts that you would highlight here from based on the video and based on critical thinking equals to fraud and risk analysis? Anyone? I play this at, before the start of any session in terms of fraud, risk, or any possibility. And I say, this is the kind of mindset that I need from the teams that are going to work together, pulling this across. Detecting possibility of fraud. Yes, that is a natural outcome. So, let me just stretch that a bit. So what, why would somebody want to not exhibit that based on known data? Okay, anything, that says, wow, yes, that is something that I want somebody to detect. Detecting data is obviously a given, and there's nothing new over there, is what I would say. Any other aspects that you would pull through? I would talk about, aspects or things like collaborative. How does that become very important in fraud and risk analytics? If you are working towards a common goal, which is fraud and risk analytics or fraud and risk prevention, and not point finger game as to you're the culprit or your data is wrong or your department is not supporting it, and that will is going to help you in early detection and definitely prevention of fraud, in terms of how you want to work with stuff. Also collaborative, because the variables that you will include into the model is not going to be confirmatory right from the beginning, but it's rather going to be exploratory. And if it's exploratory, you only want to be trying and testing before you can firm up the variables in terms of meeting the objective. So the word collaborative becomes embedded within critical thinking, to be able to give you, yes, agree, to be able to help you stimulate out of the box thinking, which is what people are wanting to look at stuff here. Yeah. Also, the agility, the speed with which you're going to look at stuff for you to be able to take a decision also becomes important in this particular case. Yeah. Therefore, critical thinking, collaborative, analytical skills become extremely important if you were to pick up the area of fraud and risk analytics. Uh, Also, you must make sure that this is an evolving model, and you must make sure that the variables that you've included are highly correlated, are highly influential, impactful in determining or detecting frauds. So sometimes it's a very patient approach. You may not get the results that you would want to, or the results that you were going to get are not going to be helping you achieve what you would like to. So obviously, trial and tested method, recurring rounds of iterations are required before you can pinpoint and firm up and say, yes, this is a solid model that I can rely upon. Now, various strategies exist with the analyst to be able to prevent frauds, but one very, very strong approach to begin with is called as descriptive analytical tools. The way you look at that data becomes different, innovative, and because it becomes different, innovative, you should be able to keep a very close eye on what are the outliers in the data, what is the noise in the data, so that you want to prevent that noise. And you are therefore going to be working with two things: data validity and data reliability. Okay. What do we understand by data reliability? When is data said to be reliable? If you've heard this word before, it's great. If you've not, it's okay. But what is your perception of the word data is reliable or data is not reliable? So what does the word reliable mean? Yeah, reliable data. Proper source. Okay. So the credibility is from the source. So Deepak, a trustworthy, Bharani, when can something be trustworthy? When it is, Jaya, no, that is a little different. When it is a right source. A easier word to complete an accurate or right source is when it is. All that is correct, but a simpler way of explaining that would be when it is error free and has no possible errors in the data. That is when data is supposed to be reliable or accurate. Now, when is data supposed to be valid? Data is valid. Answers the relevant questions. Absolutely correct. So data is reliable when it is error-free, and data is valid when it answers the exact question right. Jay, I cannot agree more than that. So your fraud and risk analytics data has got to be reliable and valid. So if there is any variable, any input in your data analytics, which is not going to help you answer the objective, and the objective being detecting and preventing fraud, in that case, you are not going to be including that into your model. And if there is any ifs and buts about your data in terms of its dependability, reliability, accuracy, then you're not going to select that data for your analysis. So therefore, your data has got to be both reliable and valid for you to be able to conduct the analysis and ensure that the actions that you take from the analysis is valid, and it is dependable and accurate, so that all the investments that you've made are bearing the right fruit. So if you were to look at a risk processing or a fraud analytics processing model, it is broken like this. You have pre-processing, you have analytics, and you have post-processing. So pre-processing is basically, if you see that the steps that are involved in pre-processing is identifying the problem, the sources of data or the variables that you want to include, selecting the data, cleaning the data, and then transforming the data. So of the 7 steps that are involved in fraud processing, about 5 of them are connected with pre-processing, and 1 with analysis, and 1 with obviously debriefing to be able to take the right appropriate action. So what does this chart tell you, guys? It tells you that organizations are struggling with data pre-processing because they have to ensure that the data is both reliable as well as it is valid. If it is neither of them, then it's going to be just a waste. It's as good as, in that case, garbage in equals to garbage out. So you need to take that time to process the data for you to be able to make any inferences out of that data with regards to detecting and preventing frauds. Obviously, it is not a one-time model. It is a continuous process, because the variables today may be irrelevant tomorrow, and the variables today may not have been included into the model for whatever reason, and they get included after a couple of series of runs that you do, and you begin to find out that, hey, the gender of the person is also required to be able to put into the fraud equation. So if you were looking at the person with the right skills and the backgrounds, a lot of people have this myth saying we want a programmer, we want a algorithm writer who specializes in probably AI, ML, etc., etc. And yes, with all due respect to everybody, it's not a requirement. It's not a must that if you don't have it, you'll fall flat. What it only tells you is that it's going to improve on the speed and the way with which things are going to work with. So in the past, the skills would get skewed towards being a programmer, which are now getting more broadened to become an analyst. And that analyst is good in programming, may not be an expert. As long as he or she can run or understand data, it's good enough. And then that person should be able to decipher the findings and make meaningful inferences. Okay, so it is a well-grounded background in terms of good technical skills to run it. Even if you run it in Excel, it's good. Just because you can't be a coder does not mean that you don't have the right skills. No. And the second one is how are you going to make the inferences, understand the business language, communicate your results so that an appropriate action can get taken. And hence, this field is fast evolving in terms of career shifts, in terms of career makes, because you now want to not only do the basics, but you want to build on the basics to be able to, help prevent and obviously detect fraud in a more streamlined and a more appropriate manner. So earlier it used to be more on the programming sides, guys, and now it is more of an all-rounder having a good mix of technical plus business skills. So of different types of frauds, we saw the largest volume was in the banking industry in our last class. And with the banking industry, with the fact that we are going cashless, we are looking at credit cards and cashless transactions that are being made using credit cards, and therefore credit card related frauds have increased and they've been on the rise. It affects everybody because we all carry a credit card. We all make cashless transactions, and where a credit card or a debit card or an Apple Pay or an equivalent is getting involved for you to be able to become vulnerable or come into the sphere of fraud. Now, what we have seen is that US leads in terms of credit card losses. And here's an interesting graph to see. Credit card frauds have only increased by about 12% per annum in the last 10 years in the last 12 years, and they're expected to be on the rise over the next 3 to 5 years. In 2016, in the United States, there were 24% of global card purchases were happening from the US, which led them to a 40% of fraud loss amounting to 9 billion in the United States itself. And this is a huge number for frauds. Imagine this money being reinvested back into the company, either pay as dividend to the shareholders or employee bonuses, or put in developmental activities to be carried out at the workplace. Yeah. So fraud, therefore, is only increasing and becoming more sophisticated. I remember when banks came for the first time with a chip card saying this is going to make the card more safe and secure, people were questioning it. And when we did a little bit of exercise saying, how can you avoid it? And that's when people said that we can avoid this by better education as to how this fraud can, impact people and how can they be more vigilant in terms of using the credit card for their products. Banks now have become far more geared in raising awareness. People have become far more intelligent before they use their credit cards for their transactions. So guys, let's try and understand this a little bit. You can take a quick shot, you can read it. What do you think of this particular email that has come from Chase credit cards to Jill Smith, and it talks about information of your credit card? Is it legitimate or is it fraudulent, a suspicious one? What would you do? If you'd like to speak about it, you could go ahead and speak if you want to. Yeah, anyone?
It seems to be kind of a the fraud email, because it is asking, first thing is it is triggering us to drop our money to them, so that it's kind of, they are going to have the money. We don't know what they're going to do. But some attractive things are there, like savings calculator is there, and then how much is the interest rate, right? So those are the things, it's kind of inducing the interest.
Okay. So in that case, what would you feel it is? Is it normal or is it suspicious?
It is suspicious.
It is suspicious. Okay, good. Anyone else? Anyone thinks it is not suspicious?
I think it is suspicious, Professor,
Okay.
for the fact that it's asking, it has a transfer balances now in the middle of the email. Then this offer expires on January 5th, 2005, as a bold date, even though the mail is sent on November 2, 2004. So there is a 2 months time, but still it's asking to transfer the balance now, right? So that is what rose my suspicion, because if you have a timeline till January 5, 2005, why would you be urging somebody to transfer balances now, right? And there was another link which says click here to transfer balance today, right?
Yeah, this one.
Trying to repeat the fact that it's free, it's secure and easy. Now, one other thing to cross-check whether it's a true email or not is to cross-check the domain from which the email has come. Is it from the same credit card company, whether I have received email from this domain before? That would be one of the ways of checking whether this is the right email ID or this is a fake one.
Correct. Okay. Good.
In addition to
I think that going to that and looking whether it's fake one or not is a very wise step to do. Good. Yeah.
The other thing is the Chase logo at the top with a blue and a red design. That's not the right Chase logo. So that's another red flag that this seems like a fraudulent email, because it's not using a trademark logo. It's rather using a red color banner, which is not used by Chase as a brand.
Okay. Interestingly, guys, this is a legitimate email. It is actually come from Chase. For maybe it's a cut and paste problem, so therefore the brand identity is not as clear. But when you when the guys who looked at the email to discover whether it is legitimate or not, they went to the domain name, and it was from Chase, and they wanted people to transfer balances because obviously they have their targets. They want people to come to them, so that gives them money. And this is an email in those days that used to come from banks as a form of marketing to you for you to be able to take an action and take an action to the email come. Now, the kind of questions that we have asked now and the kind of things that we have rationalized is very correct and impressive. That goes to show that we are far more vigilant to accepting something because we have an auditor's eye and we want to question it rather than accept it. So the kinds of answers that we give to our questions are manifold before we can actually agree and before actually say that, no, this is something that we would like to go ahead with. So that's good. Let's look at another one. What about this one? Anything suspicious or is it good to go? Yeah, anyone good to go or seems suspicious? Suspicious. Why would you say that, Amit? Okay, because of the URL. Yes, Amit.
If I look at the URL, right, it says signupaccount.com. That's not actually a PayPal URL. And that's kind of what leads me to think this may not be legitimate.
All right, very good. Bharani also says suspicious. Ayush says suspicious. And, yes, in fact, on a clearer investigation, this is a fraudulent email. Firstly, UNICEF is not only going to be asking you to donate through a PayPal site. There are many other channels that they would ask you to donate from. and there is no details in terms of address or telephone number or something that you want to call and confirm the identity of this email from where is it going to come through. So when you click on to the donate now also, it takes you to a suspicious site. And when it takes you to a suspicious site, it obviously gets more questions than otherwise. So this one is a suspicious one. Again, not yielding the objective that one would expect it to provide. So when we come to our credit card customer life cycle, like you have the product life cycle and the customer's journey, you have a customer life cycle. You first start with onboarding the customer, wherein you reach out through your sales staff, and after you've reached out, your credit card customer is going to fill up an application, and after it is reviewed, you decide whether you want to accept or reject the application. After that, you get into the process of sending out the welcome pack or sending out the credit card along with all details about how and what they should be doing to use the credit card. And then it is a regular usage of the credit card. So you manage the customer account with regards to regular review. If this customer has used this credit card many a times, then obviously that's goes to see through a trend analysis what has been the rule in the past, or it's going to be on and off spends which are not which are kind of raising a suspicious. So those kinds of customer management review tools are going to be adopted at that stage. With as part of your KYC, you want to update the customer details with regards to a national ID, with regards to a salary certificate, an electricity bill to confirm the residential address, and the other, and probably any other government related identity that proves that this person is of a legal stature. Closure and recovery. Closure is when the customer comes and says, I no longer want a credit card, so therefore you close it. Recovery is when the account turns sour and you want to, the person is only spending and not paying his credit card bills. And therefore you come with to a solution saying, let's pay this upfront, or let's pay an X amount and let's do an EMI, blah, blah, things of that kind. And that is when it is your account, your credit card account is transferred to the recovery cell for them to be able to recover the money from you. Okay. So that's what you do in the stage. Now, during the different stages, what is the frauds that can happen because of the data that is available at the different stages of the customer life cycle? So on onboarding, a customer can apply with a fake identity, and with minimum scrutiny, many a times this passes through. It's not a genuine application. It is a fictitious one. Mail theft is when the identity of the cardholder is stolen, and as a result of which they are going to ask you to deliver a card to them at a different address from what they were actually, or what you were actually going to do earlier. Transaction fraud is obviously misusing the card for various purposes, including transactions carried out. And then an account maintenance is when your identity gets taken over and your card details are passed on to fraudsters for them to be able to use that card. They would apply for a replacement card immediately at a different address. They do that also, and you wouldn't know anything about your original card unless you just call up the bank and stop it. Now, of the four broad areas, recovery is obviously out of the picture because it then gets transferred into a different process altogether. So now you have onboarding, account details, customer management, and account maintenance. Which one do you think is more common or more frequent than the other frauds? Of course, there are all types of frauds. But would you say application frauds? Would you say mail theft? Would you say transaction fraud? Would you say identity takeover? Which are the ones that are more recurring for a bank to worry about than otherwise? Or should they worry about all four of them equally? What is your view? Transaction fraud. Yes, Agya. Why transaction fraud? And Kunal, why all four of them? Gohan also says transaction fraud. So anyone who said transaction fraud, why transaction fraud? And Gohan, you're saying all four. So why all four?
So transaction is mainly the main part, right? So we are going to lose money. So if money is lost, I think the credibility and everything will be lost. So the other things are also like we can manage the customers to stay. But if money is lost, then it's the important thing. So that's why I'm just telling it as the transaction.
Okay, fine. Anyone else? Transaction fraud? Yeah, who's that?
So this is Apekshit, sir. I
Yes.
think application frauds and mail theft are two areas where bank have a little bit larger control, because it's they are involved in terms of onboarding the client or onboarding the account, so they can have controls, better controls to prevent any fraudulent activities happening at application frauds and mail theft. However, transaction fraud and identity takeover, they have less of a control there in terms of preventing that incident, right? So there is a highly likelihood that transaction fraud and identity takeover will be mm, will have a higher chance of happening compared to application fraud and mail theft.
Right. Okay, good. Anyone else? It is transaction fraud, obviously, as rightly pointed out, because of the volumes of transactions that are carried out in terms of using credit cards for the different purposes during an entire day. The frequency of onboarding and mail theft is not, or updating account details or maintenance is not as much as of transaction frauds. And you are better equipped to handle the other three than on transaction frauds. And that's where fraudsters are also getting far more sophisticated to be able to, nail down the customer and to commit a kind of fraud here. Yeah, so it is transaction fraud that most banks would therefore prioritize for. How does it work? This is there in your sync model also. So how does it work? You have a criminal travel agency. A criminal travel agency, why? Because nobody is working with genuine credit cards here. They're all using fake or stolen credit cards here. They will therefore only accept cash from you. You, as a genuine customer, you walk into the travel agency to book a ticket, and they're going to say, we get you best deals and price if you are going to be working with us, or rather working with us on a cash basis. There are no costs involved, it's all revenue. And then once the ticket gets booked through the airline, that's where it first goes, and they honor everything, and they say, okay, this is your itinerary. Post that, the transaction goes to the bank, and the bank, with whatever it says, it's an active card, so it approves. At the most, it could send an OTP, and it approves that, and therefore it releases the payment to the merchant, uh, based on the transaction that the merchant has honored going forward. Now, in this kind of a situation or scenario, where should the fraud prevention and detection framework be most appropriate? Would it be the bank? Would it be the online merchant, or would it be both? What would you guys have to suggest here? A lot of people say it is the bank only. Would you agree to that? Or would you say this part of the story as well, that yes, it is the job of the online merchant, or rather, yeah, the merchant as well? Mainly on the bank again, okay. But the moment, Gohan, you say mainly on the bank, which means also on the with the online merchant, or no, only on the bank? So guys, here, a good one. Obviously, you can not only use machine learning, you can use rule-based programs also to be able to detect and prevent frauds. The responsibility for fraud detection is at both ends, not just the bank, but the online merchant as well. So as much as banks should be vigilant about it, as much as uh, online agents need to be vigilant about it as well, to be able to confirm the transaction, confirm the stuff before you actually, confirm an email ID, confirm a mobile thing, send an OTP, whatever that case and point is. It helps you detect or prevent a fraud. So for example, if you're booking something on the Airbnb, they'll confirm your email. You will write to the owner is going to take some time, take the due diligence, and then approve your request or reject your request within a span of 24 hours. So a due diligence check is also required by the merchant and not just the bank. And therefore, fraud analysis related skills are essential for both these entities and not just the bank, as one would traditionally say. So the various data available with the bank for each of these transactions, what is the kind of data that's available uh, in terms of when you onboard? In fact, when you onboard, you can ask anything and the customer will give it to you. But after onboarding, once you send the card, so you have the card number, the details, the expiration date, the whereabouts of the customer, the name, email ID, etc. On transaction data, obviously you have everything to do with the transaction. And when you say with the transaction, you're talking about things like when was it made, for what amount, who was it swiped for, etc., etc. And these kinds of things become important as part of transaction history that you can track. Merchant data, which category, which industry, what transaction, what did it get converted into an EMI, etc., or not. Guys, just give me a minute. Yeah, just a minute. So yes, that is the different kind of data that is available with the merchant itself. And then on the other kinds of data, there is IP addresses being tracked. There is accepting or rejecting cookies that tracks the different kinds of history or different kinds of processing that you've done with the transaction that you have entered into. Yeah. So various or huge amounts of data available at the different sources that you can include into your fraud and risk model that you're going to put together. One thing that stands out is no model is complete with just 1 or 2 or 5 or 10 variables. It is far more robust, and on an average, you would have about 15 to 18 variables that you would consider as part of your rule-based method, at least to be able to detect and obviously to prevent a fraud. So one very, very popular technique is to look at graphically to picture the data. And then once you picture the data, you do something called as a outlier detection test or a trend analysis or a visualization of data to track the abnormalities of the data that you have looked at. And in this particular case, there are two demographics that we have taken of the credit card holder: the age of the holder and the income of the credit card holder. So when you look at these characteristics, what after you look at the chart, what can you tell us with regards to this chart or graph? Anything that stands out? Yeah. Income and age have positive correlation. That's true, correct. There are few outliers at 25 and 65. Correct. And therefore, where did you guys pick that up? I think you guys have picked it up from here, which is this data set, data point, and this data point seems to be a little weird because they are not in this straight line that you've looked at, and they fall away from the straight line that you have looked at. And therefore, both these data points are suspicious and needs to be looked in, further investigated to detect if it's a fraudulent transaction or not. So so at age 25, the income of the person is about 1500 US. And that is, at age 25, the income of the person is 4,000. That seems a little weird. And at age 65, the person's income is at 500, also seems to be a bit weird and therefore needs to be investigated before you can accept that data set into your model. Yeah. Yes, it could be due to some other reason also, Kunal, but at least the first round will, suppose there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 transactions that you looked at, 10 seem to be okay. These two needs further investigation before you can actually call it a fraudulent transaction or not. So these two will be highlighted for further investigation. Yeah. Now, I want us to look at this data and we'll work with it in our breakout rooms. So this is the credit card data of, just as an exercise, we have, I think, 9 or 10 records here as IDs of 10 different customers, and we have their limit balances. We have the gender, 1 male, 2 female. We have their background education. We have their marital status. We have their age. We have the amounts that they have paid in the last 6 months in terms of the credit card payment history that they have made. Now, you can take a photo shot. What I want you to do in your breakout rooms is based on this, or if you want to push some analysis together, whatever you wish to do, discussion of an approach is also good enough. What are you going to do to be able to determine whether it's a fraudulent transaction or not? And based on your visual observation and whatever additional analysis that you are doing as a group, which are the IDs that you want to highlight for possible frauds to be able to further investigate them? Yeah, so that's what we want you to do. Take a picture shot and then I will put you into your breakout room, yeah, if you've not already taken one. Okay, and I can, we are about 18 of us. So I'm going to create about 3 breakout rooms. Let's see, 6, 6, and 5, or if I do 4. Yeah, so I've created 4 breakout rooms for us. And we'll give you about 15 minutes. I don't think we need more than that to go through this exercise in our breakout rooms. Yeah, and then we discuss it. One representative per group to tell us what their group did. Okay, good. You guys are done?
Yep.
Okay, just a minute. Yeah, I just go into another room and see if they're done, then we'll all come back. All right, wonderful. So which room would like to go first? The approach as well as the transactions that you may have highlighted.
Sir, this is Apekshit from room number 4.
Okay.
We would like to go first.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at the data set, we had a couple of observations. So we'll share them one by one and we can take it from there.
Okay.
So starting with ID 20414. So 20414, the limit balance is 30,000.
So the first one, nothing seems to be suspicious in the first one, which was 84, whatever, 8483.
We initially had a suspicion because we saw the first 3 payments are exactly the same. But then this could be EMI payments. So that's why we decided that, okay, that might be a scenario.
Okay.
The other 3 months, the amounts were a little higher. So we had an initial suspicion then, but we then reduced it as a fraudulent one. Okay.
So first one is or is not deduced as a fraudulent one?
We don't see it as suspicious.
Okay, don't see it as suspicious. Okay.
The second one, 20414, if you look at the first 5 months, the average spend is between 500 to 2000. Suddenly in the 6 month, it is 28,983, which is very close to the limit balance. So that one we are considering as suspicious.
Okay.
Okay. Third one, 23144. We were a bit confused because the first 2 months are fine. The last 4 months, everything was 2000. So we are assuming it as a EMI amount. So 23144, we are not seeing as suspicious.
Okay.
4564, we thought of it as suspicious because if we put it on a graph, the amount spent like 1036, 952, 4601, 3229 are fine, but there is an outlier of 10,038.
You feel so?
Yeah. So because limit balance is 3,90,000, so 10,038 from a limit balance perspective is not an outlier. But looking at the spend trend, we felt that is like an outlier.
Okay.
So 4564 is suspicious for us. 23034 is not. 7123, all the amounts are multiples of 500. It's very odd that in last 6 months, you have amounts where everything is a multiple of 500, 6,000, 3,500, 5,000, 4,500, or 3,000. So that is definitely suspicious for us. 16,300 doesn't look suspicious. 23885, there is nothing to be suspicious about because there are no payments. 28390 looks okay. 21659, we felt it is suspicious, again with the same theory as 7123, because every amount is a multiple of 500.
Okay, fine, good, interesting. Did you guys do any analysis, or this is basically on your discussion and stuff?
Yeah, so we did think about the marital status part and the age part. Marital status, only thing was we were confused in terms of whether 1 represents a single and 2 represents married, or 2 represents single and 1 represents married. Okay, so we could not.
But what would you do? What would you do with that variable? What kind of analysis would you do?
So if its marital status is married, then because it's a family expense, then we would try to look at it as, okay, it's a family, so expenses could be higher. So if there is a higher expenses from a marriage perspective, we can reduce that. Okay. Similarly, from an age perspective as well, if somebody is a middle-aged person, that person could have responsibilities, or because age is at a middle-age level, the earning capacity could be also high. Then that's why the spend capacity could be high. as well.
Okay. So this group is suggesting that demographic analysis can also be used to detect frauds.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Good. Interesting. Good job, guys. Room 4, you said, right?
Yes.
All right. Good. Anyone else? Room 1, room 2, room 3?
I don't remember the room number. I think it was second, but we can go next.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think in addition to what Apekshit already has spoken about, maybe ID number 16300, that we would say probably sticks out the most to us.
Okay,
so,
why?
So we try to draw some correlations between the credit limit for these individuals and education. We didn't really see any correlation between gender and marital status, but education, assuming that a higher education means someone's more educated, that that usually means they have better career prospects. If we see this ID, the education level is 3, the credit limit is the lowest in the group, and the age is the highest. Right, so that was just really odd to us. And then even the payments, if we look at it, the trend is really off, and it's a really high payment for the first month,
right.
And then it tapers off, and then some small payments at the end. So that was it. And yeah, just in terms of the anomalies, just going by the transaction value, I think the other one was 4564. The first one is 10,000, and then much smaller amounts, and then 23034 also small amounts, and then there's just one big payment of 11,000.
Good. So you guys also based on discussions, right? Or did you actually do any analysis to be able to support what you're saying, or is it based on discussion and data?
It was observations.
Observation. Okay. And any idea on demographics? Like the other group said, demographics does have an impact. What is your take on it?
So honestly, we couldn't draw any inferences from that. We did look at education, age, and a credit limit. That certainly was one factor.
Okay.
But marital status and gender, we couldn't see any trends there.
Okay, good, great, wonderful, lovely. Any others? So anybody else from the other 2 rooms? Hey Ayush, are you still here, or you just logged in and decided to be at the beach, because we didn't see you in any of the breakout rooms? So anybody else from the other 2 groups or other 2 rooms?
Professor, good evening. Barney.
Good evening. Yes.
I think most of the points were discussed, but just a small clarification or a doubt that we discussed in our breakout room. With respect to the ID 4564, there is a transaction for 13 rupees, or dollars, whatever it is. So it's a minimal amount, right? So sometimes it happens, right? We, as a customer, we don't really look at the small amounts which are getting deducted in your statement. Something is abnormal, we will definitely go for an escalation, and I don't know. This is something which we discussed. Maybe I'm wrong, but we discussed this internally. Yeah.
No, this is true also, Barani, because if it's a small amount, remember the days when credit cards used to charge us for credit card insurance or shield protection, as they would say. It used to be, for example, $1 on a statement which hardly got noticed. And it went on, and somebody would notice it after 6 months, 8 months, 1 year also, when it kind of builds onto your statement. And that's when you say, like, shit, man, how did this come in? You call up the branch, call up the bank, and they say, sir, you've already been paying it for the last 3 months. Now it's on because you could have refuted it for the first 3 months. So those fine print things did carry a lot of revenue for the bank, but not in a very systematic or in a straightforward manner, is what I would say. Yeah. So yes, it does raise a concern to the naked eye.
Perfect. And also maybe we also felt maybe with this information we cannot be pretty sure to say that this could be a fraudulent one. There might be much more factors which we need to consider to decide whether it is a fraudulent one or not. This is something what we also discussed. For instance, like we don't know the spending pattern of the customer, and it could be a genuine one also. Like just by saying that there is a very huge increase in terms of amount, it doesn't mean it could be a fraudulent one. So
okay.
because it depends on the needs of the family. It depends, like might be a festival season. It could be anything, right? So that is something which is missing, and maybe which we will not be able to say very clearly.
Okay. All right. Fine. Good observation. All three rooms so far. And the fourth room?
Yeah. So we have also went through the data. For us, I think only one transaction 20414 was looking suspicious, right? And then also what we thought is like we have only limited data, so we can't go by the data that we have. Instead, we tried to make some rules. So as per the thing, like we decided that 60% of the limit should be the balance, right? Meaning the 60% of the limit balance should be the number or the amount that has to be spent, right? So more than that, it is going to be affected in the CIBIL score. So that can be used as first rule. And then we wanted to try out the combination with age and limit balance. So as an age increases, the limit balance should obviously decrease because they do have the other spends and we do not know the sources of income of the people like who are getting aged, right? So that also has to be checked. And then since that based on the demographic, we were not able to figure out any relation, but we would definitely put some charts and see like which is affecting more. And then we wanted to analyze with the average spending value as well.
Very
so
good.
Based
So,
on,
Gohan, you're saying something interesting. Are you suggesting, you said relationships, so correlation analysis?
Correct. So we want to know who is spending more. Is the higher amount of spends are occurring from a particular group, either male or female, or it's married or it's single. So these kind of combinations, we want to check it out.
Correct. So so you're saying two things here. One, what you just said is a pivot equivalent, a deep dive of a profile of the high, low, medium spenders.
Correct.
And the other one is the relationship between, say, marital status and spending.
Correct.
Or credit limit
age
and something.
spending.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah, age and spending. All right. Okay.
Correct. So these are the rules that we wanted to have, and we had one more. So yeah, the threshold we have to set, or based on the data, a threshold has to be set on these kind of pivots. So whoever are crossing those thresholds, I think we have to flag them or we have to be on a watch.
Correct. Very good, guys. All four groups in terms of discussions, in terms of rationale, logic, and if you were to extend a little bit of more on this, I'm sure we would fit in very well in terms of supporting our rationale with some analysis. And the kind of thinking is what we all got started with. And I think the more we investigate, the more our thinking is going to be clear. So on the rationale side, on the logic side, agree with everybody, but logic is also supposed to be supported by data, and that is called as data-driven decision-making or data-driven analytics. And therefore, something like this, very small scale, of course, the sky's the limit, but something at a very small scale can be started to be done as far as your data is analyzed. Yes, anybody had a question? Somebody said something.
I want to add something to this.
Yes, okay, go ahead, Kunal.
Yes, for the customer 16300, we see that it has he or she has the highest age with the highest education qualification, but has the lowest limit balance. That could be because of his past
credit history,
past default, and all those things. So he might be at the higher risk.
Okay, but you've given him a 10,000 credit limit, so then you can't say he's at high risk. You've taken that into account and reflected that in the limit balance.
Yeah, yes, that's why he has been given a low limit balance.
Correct.
Because he can be a past defaulter.
Right, but once a thief cannot be characterized as a thief, right? If he or she has taken his whatever punishment concerned. So based on that, the credit limit has reflected that. Now the spending patterns, do they seem to be abnormal or not? And probably you could say 3647 does seem to be an anomaly.
No. So one more thing from room number 4 that we discussed, me, Agya, and Jaya, is the fact that we also need a double drill down version in terms of merchant details to identify patterns if some of the purchases have been done at the same merchant or there are different merchants. Meaning, if there is a regular merchant from whom the customer does the purchase, is that the same merchant from whom the purchase has been done or not? That information wasn't available, but from a data decision-making perspective, if that information was available, we could have had more accurate assessment of our decisions.
Okay. Very good, Apekshit, but I'm so glad you did not mention this in the first part when you analyzed it, because normally what happens is when we go in with our recommendations, not saying we already do it, but we at times do it and say, we cannot answer it conclusively because we need all this information. Now, it's great to say that, but it does not help anybody. So in the when we want to say such kind of things, either in an organization setup, get that data, or make sense out of what you say and say this can be made more sense if we get this also, and please provide this to us. We tried to get it, didn't get it. If you provide this to us, we can add some more value to the analysis. So yes, whilst you observe what you observe, the good point there is you also highlight what needs to be included into the data set for you to be able to make meaningful conclusions. Good. Yeah. So, something very simple and basic is what you can, build your analysis with in terms of the logic that you said, in terms of the discussion that you've said. You can first easily do something called as an average spends of this particular person within a certain, sorry, not here. So you're going to do an average of these spends that this person has done in the last 6 months. And you can just do that and see that this person on an average has spent how much money in the last 6 months to be able to know whether it is high or low if you were to look at it from the limit perspective. And this is about close to half the limit is what this person usually has spent cumulatively in the last 6 months. And that's what you can look at. Now, what you can also look at is you can do a lower limit. And you can say lower limit is, you can do a standard deviation on this. The standard deviation will be which is deviation from the mean, and when you do the analysis, you get this number. And now what you can do is you can say, let's do a limit kind of a thing. So my lower limit equals to average minus standard deviation, and my upper limit equals to average plus SD. And now I put in the thing here. So this minus this, so that's my lower limit. And my upper limit would be this plus this. So now I can say in this data range, which are the ones which are within the limit 1841 through 12793, and this stands out. You can do an if condition, whatever, and this value stands out because it is out of the range. In this particular case, what stands out is this. In this particular one, what stands out is, just a little higher, I would say, but that is this one. This one is obviously 10,381 is outside the limit. In this particular case, what you could say is this one, it's above 6558, nothing at the lower end. On this next record, obviously the 6001 is slightly above, but still above is what you would say. Here 2218, so therefore 3647 stands as an outlier. All zeros, so therefore no brainer, no spends, and therefore nothing. Now, if it was 1 year data, then this would be a cause of concern, because with a great limit, high limit, the person has not used the credit card. So instead of becoming inactive, or why is the credit card then held, the bank should, tell the person and investigate the profile of this person to be able to know that this is a genuine one or this is a fake credit card holder. This particular piece, you can say this piece, not this piece, because it is within the limit. Actually, this one here, I'm sorry, this is within the limit and this is outside the limit and therefore highlighted. And the last one here is this particular transaction is highlighted. So therefore these records, because of this reason, in addition to the logic that you mentioned, are therefore requiring additional scrutiny to be able to detect whether these are genuine or these are suspicious transactions that the customer has made. So support your logic with the data to be able to, if you take this into a meeting room, nobody's going to deny why we want to investigate these pieces of customer IDs that you've highlighted in the case. You can overwrite it, that's a second story, but at least in the first part, you can say, let's investigate this a bit more further. You, as rightly pointed out, there is a lot of scope for correlation analysis that you will carry out. So how would you do correlation? Is basically trying to see, is there a, just as a example, is there a relationship between limit balance and gender? And let's look at that. So we go into data, analysis, we go into correlation, and under correlation, we select this piece of our data. Because we have labels in the first row, we select labels and then we say, okay. So the output is negative. Actually, a negative strong correlation exists between limit balance and gender. So there is no relationship, there's no positive relationship between these two variables that you have studied. So you can do this on any combination that you would like to be able to, somebody said age and marital status, if you want to look at that, or age and limit balance, if you want to look at that, you can bring this here and then run this on these two. Data analysis, correlation. This is what you want to look at, and that's what the answer is. So again, it's 0.4, not bad, but not very good also. It's about an average relationship, a correlationship, and therefore relationship between the two numbers. It is positive, but it is at average and not a very strong relationship between these two variables. Yeah. So this can also support your answer for the analysis that you would have done. Cool. You would be getting an exercise of this kind in your term end exam, and Excel will be allowed. So in addition to your logic, you would be asked to do some analysis, and what you do can be done in Excel, and you can upload that Excel file as well in your examination. Yeah. So good. Should we quickly take a 5 minutes, come back, and then continue with our discussion? Or you already gone on break, people? Do you need one or no? All right. So let's give you a quick 5 minutes natural break, and then let's come back and continue with our discussion. Okay. All right, guys, are we back? Okay, great. So good, let's continue with our topic of discussion that we wanted to do. And therefore, there are various ways of doing this analysis, not just one, but many. And you could do that to support what you want to support in terms of your thinking, in terms of the logic that you have put forward. So there are two kinds of models that you want to look at. One is obviously your real-time model, and the other one is your offline model. Real-time requires a lot of investments, but the big problem is, but the big advantage rather is that you are able to detect frauds faster, and therefore you can prevent the frauds from happening. As a result of which, it has less impact on the bottom line. However, because it is interruption during your current interactions with your external stakeholder, which is the customer, it could create a sort of disruption in the customer experience, as a result of which the customer can become agitated or irritated because it is out of the experience. Also, you are going to do this quite often, and it is not a good thing to say that we are working in our favor, but it's okay if we can create a disruption with the customer. Now that is okay as long as you educate the customer, to educate them and tell them that yes, it is in their favor, build on awareness, and then probably it is going to be accepted. Offline models, of course, the traditional way of looking at stuff, you process it with a certain time period in mind, and therefore not all losses can be, it's not as effective or efficient as real-time models in terms of prevention of frauds, and therefore it's more of a detection tool rather than as a prevention tool. No impact on, or minimal impact on customer service and experience. And in this case, you are able to assess, prioritize your instances or your actions based on the past results that you would have examined. Can you say you can do one over the other? No, it's a combination of both of these that can be used by banks to be able to put a robust fraud management system in place. So credit card frauds, obviously, we saw the different stages. We saw the factors involved. We saw that the transaction fraud was most important. And you must want to look at customer experience, payment experience, impact of losses based on customer profile, and also the possibility of whether a transaction is suspicious or not. So your offline models, again, a little bit more in that area. So you are going to process, this is going to be processed on not on a real-time basis, but twice a day, one midday, one end of day, or probably every hour if you would like to do so. Normally every hour is rather too much. So twice a day is what people are looking at processing this data to be able to predict any patterns, any anomalies in the data that you would have examined. The disadvantage with offline models is basically if it's a first-time user, you don't know any history. And if there is no history, you cannot detect until and unless there is a transaction. So in our case, there was one record which had all 0 payments made, high credit limit, but we were not able to detect anything until and unless the first time the credit card would have been used. Yeah. So therefore, it does not get picked up as a anomaly to the naked eye as well as to the model as well. Real time, far more robust in terms of detection and prevention of frauds, requires a lot of investment, but companies are gradually deploying real time models to benefit them, to prevent the losses and save the bottom line of the organizations, which can be wisely used elsewhere. The challenges with this part of the story is that it is based on past behavior. And if the past behavior changes, then obviously what you are going to get is based on recent behavior. because that becomes the historical reference that the model is going to look at in your kind of situation or scenario. Okay, here is another interesting case study that we want to discuss and talk about it. You can take a picture shot of it, guys. It is the largest fraud that happened in the United Kingdom, worth 17 million pound, and that got stolen. And this part is really interesting for me when I read the case, and that says caught by chance. And then that's kind of interesting, but this happened not through deliberate, but by chance. Nevertheless, it uncovered a huge fraud amount in the United Kingdom. So take a picture if you've not taken one. And these are the discussion points that I want us to focus on, which is these three questions that we would like to look into. To make our discussion even more structured, let's talk about the data and the features that we would use. This, anything that we talk about, spending patterns, anomalous transactions, possible machine learning transactions, and would you deploy online or offline or a combination of the models to be able to detect frauds in this particular case and point. So this is the case, definitely, quick short one, read it, and then let's talk about it in our discussions, post our discussions in our breakout rooms. And I would give you about 10 minutes again to do this as part of an exercise, and then let's come back and discuss it as a class. I will reshuffle it. Okay, case study one more time. Sure, we'll do that to a picture, just a minute. It is here, yeah, here. When done, let me know. Great. These are the questions. And these are the points that you should be talking about from the questions that you would begin to discuss. Right? Got it, people? Jaya, I think you'd raised it, so. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to, reactivate the breakout rooms, fresh ones. Hopefully you get to interact with. So I will recreate it. Actually, hopefully it has worked, but let's just check. All right, great. So now 10-15 minutes max, let's come back and discuss this, yeah? Great, wonderful. Good choice. We had to stop, sorry, but in the interest of time, we have to stop and then come back to our discussion in class. So any room that would like to go first in terms of what your debrief is on what you analyzed?
Hi, sir. This is Aditya from.
Hello.
So we basically discussed on the 4 points which you have provided, 5 points. So first one, to go with the data, is just that obviously we need to look at the transactional data.
Okay, and why transaction data? Because obviously,
because
obviously transactions have happened
from the clone credit cards.
Correct. Okay.
And one of the spending patterns that could be found is that the high jump in the.
Just hold on. Is that it for transaction data? Only for data, or is there anything else? Anybody else from the other rooms as we move on?
Probably demographic, or the transaction, how the transaction is done, and or the why the transaction is done.
Where also it does matter. So to whom they have sent it, since it's cross-border.
Correct. So the transaction details, genesis from where, ending where, and frequency.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. Anything else? What about IP addresses and stuff? The other data. Is that important?
Yes. So that how the transaction from where it is done. So we could collect the machine information.
Yeah, exactly. So where does not mean country, but includes the IP address.
Yeah. It could be one point of demography. Other point could be the device from where it is done.
Correct. Yes.
And on the next point, which is the spend pattern, is just like we could see in the case study that they have been buying a lot of luxurious items like mansions and all. So these could be observed in those transactions and probably the frequency must be high for those period of time, getting high value of transactions. So this could be one of the patterns to identify those spends.
Correct.
And the other
and just to answer that, it is because look at the kind of luxurious items they have done: purchase of mansions, villas, hot properties in London, first class travel, 5-star holidays, designer clothing and apparel. All these are adding a lot of question marks to the spends and to the origin of these spends.
Yeah. And
I have a question here to the spend part of it. See, we are trying to analyze the credit card fraud data, right? The cards which they cloned and everything, and the siphoned of the money through various channels. How are we going to detect, like say, suppose somebody's money has been stolen. It has been stolen by say 3 different persons and they spend on say an English mansion or a Spanish villa. How are we going to connect that dot?
Firstly, it'll come as your anomalous transaction. It'll be a one-off transaction that you would have gotten, right? Because you don't buy villas regularly. So if you've spent it's a big ticket item on a luxury things, the first time itself it should get caught as an anomaly or as an outlier.
No. So my question is, Professor, the gang here, what they might have done was they had stolen like 32,000 credit cards data, right? So say suppose I say a mansion is for say 1 lakh rupees, just to keep the numbers easy.
Sure.
They might have siphoned off say $1,000 from 100 credit cards, and they would have bought that 1 lakh mansion. Okay, how would you connect the dots there? So I think the first time they did not get caught while they were leading such a luxurious life was because authorities could not have detected where the money was flowing. They could have done a lot of small transactions and it could have accumulated into a big one also.
Correct. So even if it is multiple small transactions, that should get caught up, because as you rightly said, fraudsters are no longer going to do big ticket to stand out. They would do small value transactions nowadays to pass in the whole game. And that needs to be standing out from investment into an appropriate or a robust model that can pinpoint these things. Because otherwise, if the police had not caught them, this would have gone under their nose as a regular transaction, or which was going like that.
And in this, we can also catch the frequency, like as Jay mentioned.
So multiple small value is also a question mark. like in the other data that we saw, it has been 6 months and the person has not spent a money. As there are zero spends or a very high credit limit. Investigate it, saying, is that a real, genuine one, or is that a bogus credit card holder to begin with? And now what are banks doing? If a year passes by, a letter goes out saying you haven't used, if you don't report within the next X days, your credit card will become inactive and it will no longer be available for renewal.
And one more thing, we also discussed that it might happen that they have withdrawn cash from the credit card. That might also be a suspicious activity.
True. Yes, that might be a suspicious activity, definitely. And if it is of low or large value, definitely yes.
Yes. And at that time in 2007, there was not much security with the card. They had only magnetic strips.
Exactly.
OTPs were not required at that time, I think.
Correct. And these chip cards had just begun to come in at that point of time. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is Apekshit from room 2, sir. So one other point, so there were a lot of points that we discussed, but some of them I'll just quickly highlight. One of them being that in terms of data, right, when we are capturing the data, we need to capture data for the individual, what are the limit the individual has, and geographic location where the spend is happening. Now, if you have two transactions that are happening in an offline mode in geographies that are miles apart, that could have been caught, that how can one person with the same credit card do transaction at do different offline locations, which are not closer to each other. That's one. The second point that we spoke about is, in the case study, it is the countries that are mentioned is UK, Poland, Estonia, US, and Virgin Islands. So if we would have captured the data of the merchants, the KYC information of the customer as well as merchants, and from an OFAC perspective, Estonia and Virgin Islands would be a red flag. So if there are transactions happening in Estonia and Virgin Islands, that should have been caught in the bank, in the AML or anti-money laundering division should have raised those as red flags that there are transactions happening in Estonia and Virgin Islands.
Correct. And therefore, in our example, all that you've mentioned will go in as anomalous transactions and outlier detection as possible highlights through possible reasons to further investigate. True. So the country of transactions where they are being made, origin and source and disbursement should be appearing as a outlier, as a flag, and also anomalous transactions being carried out multiple times should also be appearing as a red flag.
And one more point to what Jaya was mentioning, as an example, that if say $1,000 have been withdrawn from 100 customers, to use that money to buy something, these 1,000 transactions or the $1,000 from 100 customers would have gone to one single account. So from an AML standpoint, when you have multiple inflows happening of the same amount from different channels, that's also a red flag.
Yes, absolutely correct. Agreed. Good point. Anyone else on any other pointers? And what about the offline or online? Would you suggest one or both or none? It can't be none. So is it one or both?
I think in our group, there was a slight confusion on what is online and offline. But it's like it should be usage of both.
Correct.
A real time plus running those data into the batches.
Right.
So we should give combination of both and help us in detecting the fraud. And other point that we have about was the ML technique. So I think clearly in this case, it could be the outlier detection method, so that those high spends can be detected from the transaction.
Correct. And just to reinforce the points, guys, for fraud and risk analytics, the first and foremost area that widely gets done is an offline method, and within the offline method, the descriptive analysis, including outlier detection. Somebody in the group was talking about box plots. Yes, absolutely. A box plot, a deviation analysis, an outlier analysis is an absolute essential, it is the bread and butter of fraud and risk analytics, and no model, however sophisticated it is, will work without this as a starting step.
Yes, sir. It was room 2. In room 2, we were discussing about using box plot.
Yes, absolutely. So yes, box plot, outlier test detection are essential requirements to determine whether the data is abnormal or is normal from that point of view, from the fraud's perspective. Good.
Sir?
Yep.
Good evening, sir. This is Priya from the Upgrad team, sir.
Hi, Priya.
Sir, actually, I just wanted to ask एक consent share था आपसे that can I just publish the end session that the type form link so that the learners can punch in their feedback, sir?
Yeah, we'll stop, and I think that's very essential. So we'll give everybody the next couple of minutes to do that. So if you can just send the link, they can just do that, and then we'll end the class after that. Just a couple more slides, people, and then we'll end. Yeah. So
yes,
just
sir.
okay. So just give yourself, a few minutes of your time, and just kindly fill this feedback form out. If you've done, let me know so that we can move ahead.
Thank you, sir, and I extremely apologize for breaking the flow of the session. Actually,
no, this is also very important. Otherwise, we have such a dynamic crowd. No, the discussion would go on. But thank you for interrupting it, because this personally to me is very important.
Sure. Folks, kindly punch in your feedbacks, and you can let sir know. You can just type done or yes in the chat box so that he can proceed with the session. जो भी remaining slides है. That would be helpful, guys. Sir, I'll just take your leave, sir. Do let me know if there is anything else required from my end.
Sure. No, all good. Thank you. Okay. Good. So we are 2 down. Okay, I think everybody's done. That's excellent. So let's move on, guys. So on that discussion, on the discussion, if we were to summarize the points, this would be the points that it would more or less look like. So yes, based on the topics that we've spoke about, transaction data, merchant data, source data, country data, all required to be able to spot the anomaly. Repeated spends on luxury items or holidays need to be caught. Many anomalous transactions, as we spoke about. Definitely descriptive analytics, box plot, outlier detections need to be carried out to be able to, as a starting point of fraud analysis, and a combination of online versus offline models to be used to spot the fraud, and prevent it from happening and save the organization from huge losses that it would carry out. Anything else anybody would like to add?
In offline data, how many complaints have come?
have come or would come if you've implemented it. Right now, nothing was implemented. So we need to ask them to implement it.
Yeah, then that should be it. So
yes. So offline will definitely give you a past historical transaction, detect and give you these outliers, outlier test to begin with. Online will do it at a much faster pace so that future you can prevent it from recurring again. Yeah, Gohan, okay?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm okay.
Great. So obviously an integrated approach needs to be used, and you want to create something like a fraud lab that is going to look at all unavailable data and sources for you to be able to determine whether this is a regular or this is an irregular or a suspicious transaction. So any and all sources of data are now used, not just structured, but unstructured data, like biometrics, like social media data, like devices. In fact, social media data is so widely used by the insurance sector that there's a case in point that they have used, social media to offset a fraud that for a claim that was made by an expensive car driver who had wrecked the car himself and said that it's an accident and I want the money through insurance. So, these unstructured data is also used to prevent and detect frauds, and your model should be able to accommodate this piece, and your new age models are able to do so. So your fraud management is a four-pronged function, and that is, it should be your model development should be responsible, which means it should be able to perform what it is expected to perform, that is fraud detection and prevention. It should be accountable. So if there is any issues, any frauds that are still occurring, which should not have been occurring, it should be reevaluated, because on the accountability perspective, it's probably what worked yesterday may not work today. Consulted people should be able to look at the fraud model before they commit or do anything, and that should be a heavy reliance on that. And the fraud management team needs to be informed of any changes in the variables or functions or policies or procedures that are carried out within the organization to be able to include that or exclude that from the model itself. So the different roles that the model developers have got to perform, and therefore the model has to perform, is RACI approach, which is responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. Banks have been doing, we say that banks are investing, detecting, preventing, but they're also taking a lot of effort to be able to educate the user with regards to fraud and risk management. And when they're talking about this acceptance, you want to, obviously they say, please watch your credit card, do not carry everything. And there are many more things in addition to what you see here as their regular communication that goes to the customer to detect and prevent frauds. I have something that I want to show. I have this nice, credit card fraud strategy from one of the banks, and this is how their global fraud strategy is with regards to credit cards. So what they say is they are going to do new product launches. They're going to enhance the authentication framework with the OTP, and they're also looking at what is happening around them from an environmental perspective, which is going to be able to impact what they are looking at with regards to something which is normal or abnormal. So their strategy is they're going to invest in fraud analytics, detection and mitigation. Early warning signals will be given to prevent frauds from occurrence, and to the customer also with regards to OTP framework. What the bank now does is, if the amount is above a minimum threshold, you get an OTP immediately rather than the transaction going through. And obviously the recovery part of it. So here they are detailing it a bit further. On the analytics front, they say, what are we doing currently and how can we enhance what we are doing so that fraud gets detected much faster and obviously goes through the prevention cycle as well. What are we doing? They're obviously investing in technology. More rules-based is what they're following. And that's what they're doing, is upgrading the rules on a iterative, continuous basis. How does it benefit them? What are they doing about customer contact strategy? And so therefore they're saying they're communicating across multiple channels to ensure that there is a call to the customer just to confirm, either an email or a voicemail or in whatever ways and means, to confirm that this transaction is genuine or not. Security operations, they investigate the misuse. That's what they would want to do. And then they are going to develop sophisticated state-of-the-art cards with chip and pin 3D secure tokenization to be able to detect and prevent fraud. So it is a five-fold strategy that they want to do across the globe with regards to credit card frauds. It talks about customer contact strategy a bit more in detail and how they would reach out. It also gives you a little bit of education movement, which does come quite a lot of times in their emails as an email communication, reinforcing what needs to be done to detect and suspect and therefore overcome this fraud. Some best practices that they are doing is, what are they doing? They review the accounts, they place temporary blocks, etc., etc. And some good practices that they do, which according to them are creating a differentiator, or probably a stronger differentiator in the credit card fraud measures that they have taken. Best practices for cardholders, some interesting and important practices that card holders should be able to talk about. This is on the education forum. So never share your passwords, practice computer best practices, review your profile, review your transactions, and shop safely online. A lot of us have a separate credit card that we use only for online shopping with a very low limit. So that's something that is there. So just to again reinforce that credit card fraud, and as a part of fraud and risk strategy, does get discussed and approved by the board and the senior management as part of corporate governance, so that it can be a policy and a procedure, and it can be followed by everybody top down across the organization. Yeah. Any questions? All good to go? So guys, this is what we wanted to talk about on our day 2 of credit card frauds. And tomorrow, what we're going to pick up is risk analysis and talk a little bit about the types of risks and how the organization can work with regards to prioritizing and overcoming, or rather mitigating, those risks. Yeah, and on our last day of our class, we will be talking about the term end exam also, in terms of the pattern, in terms of what is expected and what are the questions going to be more or less like. Any additional questions? Yeah, please go with your project, Kajal, read it, and we will be talking about it between tomorrow and on Sunday next or Saturday next, to be able to understand any issues, problems that you would have had with regards to what you're going to be doing in with your project. The project has 2 sets of data, the unclean and the clean one. You will obviously be using the clean data for your analysis. And that is going to be, they've also given you a little bit of write-up as to what have they done to be able to work with your data that you're going to be working with. Yeah. So simple, straightforward analysis is what you have to do in terms of data reading, in terms of putting, interpreting, and in terms of stating which is a better framework that you would like to suggest based on what rationale that you're suggesting. So an interesting, straightforward assignment is what I would call it for this particular analysis, focusing more on interpretation of what you are going to suggest. Okay. Good, guys. So we will see you tomorrow morning. And if there is any other questions, happy to address it, or else have a beautiful evening or whatever is left of it. And let's see you tomorrow. Thank you. Good night, Apikshit. Take care.